Welcome to the instructional video on how to do the second assessment worksheet. Last year when you guys were in 6th grade, you created what was called a template, which basically was a piece of paper that you guys created your actual project in actual size and measurement. Here, we're going to be doing the same thing. This worksheet is designed so that it is exactly the same size and shape as the block of wood. And because of that, we are going to be designing our cars exactly the same sizes and shapes that we need it to be. We have to follow 5 specifications in order to do so. Up here in the right-hand side are 4 questions. Now, the only reason there's 4 questions is because the 5th specification deals with the weight of the car, and here we can't represent weight. The first question here is, what is the range of length my dragster has to be? The specification, if you look under the specifications page or tab within my web page, is anywhere between 8 inches to 12 inches. Now that is a range, so you can design your car anywhere you want. You line up your 0 with one end, and you figure out how long you want your car, and then you mark it off, and then you're good. For this particular case, if I want my car to be 9.5 inches, I mark it off, and I draw my line for both. I want it to be 9.5 inches for both sides. And now you do not have to shade this out. I'm just going to do this for my demonstration, but all of this would be thrown in the garbage. So I now have what the range of my length of my dragster has to be, anywhere between 8 inches and 12 inches. I chose 9.5 inches. This one is done. The next one is, how high should my axle holes be in the side view? Now before I do this, I have to create the side view of my car. Now I'm also going to skip down and go to the last question where it says, how close am I allowed to cut to the CO2 cartridge hole? The reason I'm going to skip to that is because my CO2 cartridge hole has a lot to do with my design that I'm going to do for my car. In the case of where I want to actually design the car, I also want to take weight off the bottom of the car. By taking weight off the bottom of the car, I'm making it lighter, and lighter is faster. So each one of these little squares here are 1/4 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch. And because they're 1/4 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch, if I, let's say, took off 2 rows of squares, the measurement I'd be taking off would be 2/4 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch. I could take off 3 squares because I'm still not within my range of my CO2 cartridge hole, which we're going to talk about in a second, and that would be 3/4 of an inch. I can do it there too. But for this demonstration, I'm only going to take off of 1/2 an inch. So I'll start my line here, and then this line that I'm drawing will be the new bottom of my car. And even though I kind of came up, that's a freehand thing. I don't want you guys doing it freehand. I'd like you guys to use the triangles to draw your straight lines. It'll help you guys come up with things. Also, you'll notice that I'm using a Sharpie marker here. I do not want you using a Sharpie marker. I would like you guys to use pencil until I talk to you about your designs. This way, if you need to make any changes, you can just erase. But I'm only doing this for the demonstration, so just pay attention as we go. So now I can actually get rid of all of this. And once again, getting rid of all of that weight makes my car lighter. Now I can draw the rest of my design. And I will keep this design very similar to the one that I've been drawing on the board for the last couple days, because I figure you recognize it, so I might as well do it. And then that I can take off too. And then this part on the top will be cut off as well. And now I can go back to my second specification. But before I go back to the second specification, this 4th one here that talks about how close you can get to the CO2 cartridge hole, you'll notice that the CO2 cartridge hole is here. And then there is a white space around the CO2 cartridge hole. That white space is actually the measurement for this specification. The specification is you are not allowed to cut within 1/8 of that CO2 cartridge hole. If you cut into that CO2 cartridge hole at all, the CO2 cartridge itself could get through the car. And if it does, it could cause a lot of damage, both to the hallway, to your head. You know, as we go through the list of things that this CO2 cartridge could destroy, it's pretty gruesome. So let's just understand that this is kind of a safety issue here. We do not want to cut into this area or come too close to this area, because once we start sanding down certain portions of our car, we can end up sanding into the CO2 cartridge hole, and then now the CO2 cartridge has a way to get out of it. So we don't want that to happen. So the specification for how close we're allowed to cut to the CO2 cartridge hole is 1/8 of an inch. Please remember not to design within that 1/8 of an inch anywhere. Now I'm going to go back to my second specification, which is how high my axle should be in the side view. Now the actual measurement for how high your axles have to be in the side view is 1/8 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch. Now let's just say that you don't know where to find 1/8 of an inch on the ruler. So here's my ruler. The measurement has to be somewhere in here. On the inch worksheet that you have, you did from 0 to 1. And somewhere on that inch worksheet, you'll locate where 1/8 of an inch is, and you'll locate where 3/8 of an inch is. In this particular case, I know where it is. 1/8 of an inch happens to be the second line, and 3/8 of an inch happens to be the sixth line. But I would like you guys to make sure that you're checking your measurements as you're going through this with that inch worksheet open. Otherwise, you're not really doing yourself any good, and if you mess up in those specifications even 1/16 of an inch, you could go out of spec. And if you go out of spec, we snap your car, we throw it in the garbage, and you have to get a new one at a 10-point reduction. So now I'm going to draw my 1/8 of an inch specification by lining up the 0. Let me zoom in here so you can see. Lining up the 0, as you can see, with the very bottom of my car. So that's the new line that I made. That's the line that's going to be the bottom of my car. And then I'll slide it to wherever I want my axles to be. And I can make a mark, a little hole, wherever the specification for that axle hole is going to go. So I can go I can go as low as 1/8 of an inch, which is the second line, or as high as 3/8 of an inch, which is the sixth line. I'll actually put mine somewhere in the middle of that. You can put it on the line if you want to. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the very back of the car. 1/8 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch. Now if I go to 3/8 of an inch, I'm actually getting into that 1/8 of an inch around my CO2 cartridge hole, so that would put me out of spec. So I'm going to go underneath that and put my axle hole here. My side view is now done. Once the side view is done, I can actually check this part off, and now I'm going to have to go to the next one, which says how wide my car should be where the axle goes through it. That is for the top view of the car. So we have our side view axles. We have to line those side view axles up with the top view, just like we did in our previous homeworks. And we take our triangle, just like we did in our previous homeworks, and we draw our lines. Here. And here. Now where that axle goes through the car in my top view, where that axle goes through the car in the top view, there is a specification. And this is the one where I told you that a lot of kids go out of spec, so I'm going to do this in red. The area around that axle hole, you need to make sure that the actual car itself is 1 5/8 inches wide. It does not matter what car we're talking about. Here is our axle holes. This one is actually taped, and you'll figure out why when we get into it. But these axle holes right here, where the axle goes through the car, which would be in that location because there's an axle hole there, the actual thickness, the distance between my thumb and my finger has to be 1 5/8 inches. Here is another car. You'll see the axle hole. There's another axle hole. I'm going to put my thumb and my finger over these axle holes, my thumb and my finger over these axle holes, and when I turn to the top view, notice how the design of the car gets wider there. Right here is 1 3/8 inches, and here is actually 1 5/8 inches. The minimum specification for this is 1 3/8 inches, which is fine that you do it that way, but you never want to design your car at 1 3/8 inches because when you take it up to the machines and then you cut it out at the machines and then you take it back to your table and you start to sand it down on the sides, you'll go less than 1 3/8 inches. You'll go out of spec, we'll snap your car, we'll throw it in the garbage. We don't want that to happen. So when you're designing your car, where the axle goes through it, you must design it 1 5/8 inches. Now 1 5/8 inches, you need to measure it on your ruler, find out what it is, and then mark it. Now it just so happens that the actual thickness of this block of wood is 1 5/8 inches. So these two red marks, the distance between them is 1 5/8 inches apart. I'm going to do that down here as well, 1 5/8 inches. And now I can design my car. Now on this particular portion, so on the beginning I just sort of freehanded my car. I'm going to actually use the triangle to make the actual design here. And when I do that, I'm only going to design 1/2 of the car to start. And the reason I'm going to do that is because it's graph paper, I can actually make sure that I'm symmetrical on both sides of this very dark line in the middle. kind of like what we did with your 8 ideas. Remember, the dark line in the middle is the line of symmetry, and everything on one side should be exactly the opposite as everything on the other side. So for those of you that are having trouble with symmetry, I'm going to help you with that right here. Also, those of you that are having trouble with your drawings because you're not a very good artist, this will help you out as well. So I'm going to design my car, and from here, we want to always give ourselves like 2 squares of thickness on both sides. So I notice I went to a square here and a square that way. So 2 squares of thickness. Now from this, I'll make a point here, which actually I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I went over 1.5 because there's a little tiny bit there. So I got a point there. Then I'll do the same thing. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll just go 5 on this one and put a point there. Now I can take my straight edge, draw the lines, and now I can kind of come up here, and obviously this is the end of my car, and I don't necessarily want it to be a point here. And if you're worried about streamlining, don't. As long as the side view is streamlined, the wind will flow over the car and you'll be fine. So I'm not worried about there being a point here, but I'm going to have it taper in a little bit. What I'll do is I'll come in to about this spot right here, which is basically one square from that symmetry line. And I'll draw my mark. And I'm not going to come in taper in it all in the back. I want to keep it perfectly straight. So now that I have 1/2 of my car designed, I can then do the second half just by doing the same measurements from the center line. So I went 1 over here. I'm going to do 1 over here. When I did this, I went 5 down and 1.5 over. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1.5 inches over. And then you'll notice I'm like 2 squares over here. I'm just going to go 2 squares over there. And now I pretty much have it all squared away for me. I can be symmetrical, and I'm just going to draw it perfectly symmetrical. Now, where it says how wide my car should be, where the axle goes through it, is 1 5/8 inches. I've done that on both accounts of where my axle goes through my car. So it goes through here and it goes through there, and in both areas, my car is exactly 1 5/8 inches thick. So I'm making my mark. I'm looking to see it's 1 5/8 inches thick, and I will increase the zoom here so you guys can see this side. And notice that I am 1 5/8 inches thick. Okay, there's the bell. It means I'm running out of time. So we're looking at 1 5/8 inches, as you can see. And because I have 1 5/8 inches there, I'm all set. All of this area here will be cut off and thrown in the garbage. And again, you do not have to shade this out. I'm only doing it for the demonstration of the class. And when you are done doing this in pencil, you are done. And next thing you'll do is we'll talk about your designs, and then we'll cut them out, and we'll use this design to create our styrofoam car. Thank you.